Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Keynes, and Ed Mann.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. My name's Ed Mann, and today it feels like deja vu. It probably because it is. I am joined today by the great Joe Watkins. How you doing, man?
Hi, Ed.
It really does feel like deja vu. For the audience won't know, that I'm going to put myself well and truly in it. We did do this podcast yesterday, lunchtime, and then I decided to clean up some folders and then realised I deleted it. And I went through all manner of means of trying to rescue the file, and I found a lot of other stuff that I could rescue, which I didn't want. I was like looking through, I was like, yeah, I don't need that song, trying to go for these files that this program had been able to rescue. And I'm like, I only want one file. I literally have just emptied my trash. I want it. But yeah, no luck. But Joe's been really kind to kind of come on again, and we can almost do the same podcast again, but be even better because we've done it twice now. So, you know, it's like almost like it's a warm-up episode, yesterday's one.
Yeah, I can't really remember what I said because it was a whole day ago anyway, so it'd be like new for me.
There we go. I like that. Yeah, exactly. You know, for us it's fresh. So and it's a fresh day. It's a brand new day. It's a new day. Anyway, so yeah, Joe, how are things going, man? How are things in the life of Joe Watkins at the moment?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Working on PHP 7 and extensions.
And that is it, yeah, because the extension work you've been doing, you've done quite a lot of stuff. If people keep in contact with you, kind of in touch with you on Twitter and your blog posts and stuff, you've done a lot of work with a certain pthreads project. And I know that, you know, you've spent, I mean, we spoke about it yesterday. But yeah, so, you know, you've been working on the pthreads stuff. And I'm just wondering, so this is version 3. I'm just wondering what kind of things have changed, what things have been added. I'm right in thinking that version 3 only targets PHP 7.
Yeah, it only targets PHP 7 because the time to use PHP 5 is over.
I mean, PHP 5.4, end of life now. That's well and truly gone. I know that came. Yeah, so it is fresh. Like, people need to be moving on.
They need to move on quickly, and in 11 months, the whole 5 series goes end of life. But then it still gets security fixes for a year, so everyone has to move on. And just to kind of push with that. Just to push everyone in the right direction, I just thought I won't try and duplicate any new stuff for the version that was out for PHP 5, which was version 2.
Because so what is the main shift then between version 2 and 3?
Well,
other than the platform obviously being different, PHP 7.
Yeah, but the platform being different means many things. The platform is it. Okay, so since the beginning of PHP 4, there's always been facilities to execute in multiple threads. Now, so that's been there a really long time. But
was it ever unhooked? Like, were people actually using it, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, everyone that uses PHP on Windows is using it. I mean, the default build on Windows is threaded, and IIS requires threading. So
is the reason? Sorry, what is the reason why it's compiled and threaded on Windows? Just because of iOS needing it, or was it just because of the way that Windows works?
Well, I mean, it's a mixture of the fact that iOS used to need it. I'm actually pretty sure it still does, unless you use a fast CGI. But if you use the actual module, Windows just does better with threads than it does with processes. A process is a heavier unit of execution in Windows than a thread is. So it just prefers threading, and that's why IIS chooses it.
Yeah, so why is it that Windows then tends to favour threads then? Because so what is the difference between the threading and the process model in Windows? Why is it so much more intensive?
Well, I don't know a super huge amount about it. I just know that a process is heavier in Windows than a thread is, and so I mean, the forking model is pretty much the same as it is in Unix, but I'm not sure what leads everyone down that road. It's not just IIS. I mean, like I said, the Apache Friends binaries are all distributed with thread safety enabled, and they use the worker npm rather than the multi-process npm. So that's always been a thing, but threaded in userland is a different thing. And in PHP 5, all the kind of kit you need to make it work is already, like I said, already there. But in PHP 5, actual objects, they were not stored in a very useful way. That when you passed around an object, the actual variable, the only thing in the variable internally was a handle, like a numeric handle.
So like a pointer to a bit of memory kind of location.
Not even a pointer, no. Just an offset, a numeric value for an offset.
Oh right, okay.
So if you wanted to actually get the object, you have to read what is still the object store. Now, that's obviously heap allocated for each thread, and to read it at any time during execution would be extremely dangerous. So you can't do that.
You can't rely on it being what you want it to, because someone may have changed it underneath you.
Yeah, because you can't use the handle. Not only is it dangerous, it's unreliable because the handles are reused. So that if you pass an object to a thread, and at the time you pass it, it's got an ID of say 1, and then by the time the thread references it, the handle's been reallocated to a different object, but there's no way to check.
So you can't rely on it at all.
You can't rely on it, and it would be dangerous to rely on it because, like I said, it involves reading the heap of another thread, and that's dangerous. Well, it's dangerous if you're going to do it at any time without synchronization or mutual exclusion. So you don't do that. So in PHP 5, the only real way to pass around objects was to serialize them.
And that was passing around objects between threads?
Between threads, yeah. Was to serialize them.
And is that the serialize that we typically think of, when we say serialize an object into string form, and then able to unserialize it and stuff like that?
Yeah, for normal objects, yeah, it's just the normal serialize that you're used to. So threaded objects, because they are safe to be accessed from multiple, certain structures in them are safe to be accessed from multiple contexts. They can be passed around. They can be passed around physically, and they were. But now in PHP 7, an object is actually part of the zval structure, so that you don't. If you've got a reference to it, you've got a reference to it. You don't have to worry about the unreliability problem, and you don't have to read the heap of another program to access another thread to access the object itself. So this is much safer, and all of the you've probably heard people say that everything's on the stack now, all the variables are on the stack, and that's what makes it so fast. Well, that means also that you can read. It's safe to read stack allocated scalars from other threads because they're on the stack, and they're not going to be reallocated. So and it makes it obviously much faster to do that. So that was the main driving force behind rewriting most of pthreads, which is what I've done for PHP 7.
Yeah, because you had like an initial tweet out, didn't you, saying that you'd actually been able to, you've succeeded in passing, your test suite now passed on PHP 7, but you were kind of hesitant to put a tag on it as version 3 or a new version.
Yeah, I got the test suite to pass, and it didn't feel right to tag a release. It just didn't feel. I don't know. It still had some of the kind of warts that have become obvious over the last few years, and
what could you just kind of expand on what warts, like what kind of things you felt were warts within version 2?
Well, a good API should only really enable the programmer to write good code. I know that's like an ideal, but when it's an ideal worth striving for when you're talking about multi-threaded code, because it's hard enough to understand.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
if you give people bad ways to do stuff, they will do it the bad way. So an example of that is on threaded objects, which are obviously at the base of all other threads and workers. So all threaded objects have got a property store, like an array of properties, like a normal object's got in PHP, but the structure is manipulated in a way that is thread safe. So it doesn't use the same store that PHP uses, but the same kind of thing. And in pthreads v2, I exposed lock and unlock on threaded objects, which was really stupid.
How much do you regret?
Well, yeah, because it was really stupid, because it's really dangerous, because if you lock an object and then for whatever reason execution does not continue past the point where you unlock it. So you leave execution locked for whatever fatal error, uncaught exception, something like that. Not using finally or whatever. The next context that tries to lock the object will deadlock, and that's unavoidable.
And sorry, context is a different thread. Am I thinking that context is?
Yeah, context is a thread. Yeah. So that was really stupid to expose that, because there's a way to do it without. There was already another way. The synchronize method acquires a lock and always releases it, even if your code fails.
It handles internally all that boilerplate, all that stuff you need to do.
It's just not possible to do that in userland. Even if you're really, really careful, it's just not possible to always do that.
Because I think I'm right in thinking that you actually added lock and unlock. It would expose them for your debugging and testing yourself, to try it out.
No, that was actually even stupider than that. I actually exposed directly, partly mutex and condition variables, which are like the lowest level primitive that there are.
And what is a mutex and a condition variable?
Okay, so a mutex is mutex means mutual exclusion, and it literally means what it says, mutual exclusion. It excludes everything but one context.
So only one context can use that bit, that access that object, to interact with that object or that bit of code at one time.
Can execute a piece of code at once. So you lock the object, and then only the context that acquired the lock can execute the piece of code until you unlock it, and then other contexts can lock.
It's a stop this kind of problem where someone thinks it's doing something while someone's overwriting it the other side, and it all just becomes a mess.
And a condition variable is slightly different. It's for sending signals between threads and waiting for other threads. So I shouldn't have exposed them, and I said at every opportunity, don't use them. They're there for testing. They're for me for testing. Don't use them.
But then you still get, I'm sure you get bug reports and also queries about the fact of using lock and unlock and
and mutex and condition. So I removed those because you shouldn't provide a way to do stupid things, because people will do stupid things. So I removed those, and they were like the main removals. That's what got removed, and then added was the concept of volatile objects. So volatile literally means rapidly changing, unpredictable.
So something you can't read, you can't predict it. Can't rely on it.
You have to treat it with care. So that's the definition. That's the definition of volatile. And an object that's being manipulated by multiple contexts is volatile.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So now, a volatile object is quite slow because it's exempt from a normal threaded object. Has got new rules applied to it that say that if threaded object A sets a property to another threaded object B, the reference that A holds to B is immutable. It's final. It can't be changed.
So you can't go into because am I right in thinking that version 2 was all volatile? There was no kind of
it's all volatile. Yeah. So by doing that, it might seem like an arbitrary limitation, but actually it's not, because by doing that, we're able to assume that
nothing's changed after that point. You don't have to ever check, and you don't worry about that.
You don't have to track changes, which is expensive, and we don't have to keep verifying that objects are valid, because we know they're valid because they're immutable, they're final, they can't be changed.
Snapshot in time, and so that's what's happening in version 3 now. That we have
in version 3, threaded members of threaded objects are immutable, and to get around that, if you see that as a limitation, like you've got some code that's designed to mutate threaded members, then you can use a volatile object. But these are really bad, and they should be avoided because...
Well, it's quite good that you kind of split them out and then put them in kind of like you are using and explicitly say a volatile object. There's the reason behind it. There must be a reason behind it.
And lots of languages do have this. Lots of languages do have this concept. So it's a good thing. It allows you to make optimizations and assumptions about normal code that means it can go faster, like a lot faster. So that's good. It allows you to avoid some synchronization. All good multi-threaded code avoids synchronization whenever it can, because it's just a pathway to doom, basically. If you don't do it right, it's hard to detect when you haven't done it right. Nothing's going to shout at you and say you haven't done it right until it goes wrong, and it's just better to avoid it if you can. If you can avoid lock-in and things like that, you should. So that allows us to make some assumptions that make really good optimizations that everyone will feel. So that's good.
Yeah, because I've noticed, because looking through the blog post, I think it was your second one where you had kind of benchmarks, and I know, obviously looking at the title, it's like, well, I can't remember what was the saying that you had in there, but it was quite a funny one about, good benchmark is someone who was able to fake a benchmark or something.
Oh no, I would never trust a benchmark you didn't fake yourself.
That's it. I love that. I think that's a great saying.
I think that comes from Nikita, actually. I think Nikita said it in conversation, and it just rings so true.
It's so great.
But you shouldn't trust benchmarks, but you shouldn't trust the time of the benchmark, because I've got a really quick computer. If you do it on your computer, and I had a really slow build of PHP, so if you do it on your computer, you might get a different time. So you shouldn't trust the time, but what you can trust is
the instruction set. That's it.
Yeah,
the count.
The number of instructions is more or less fixed. I mean, as near as it makes no difference, fixed. So you can trust that. And that's what I was showing, that the new code is something like 2 billion instructions, and the old one was 14.
That's exact, because I mean, and is that all to do with the fact that it doesn't have to do all this, like, because it's the serialization hack and things like that you were talking about?
It's to do with avoiding synchronization, and it's also to do with, because you don't need to synchronize because it's immutable. So, and the first time you construct the object, it's synchronized, so it's safe. So it's partly that, but it's also objects are not, that you don't need to keep unserializing threaded objects. Even though they weren't actually serialized, it was only a hack, but you get to avoid that too. So that's
because I know that you had to do a lot of voodoo magic to kind of, like, in version 2. I remember you saying that there was a couple of bits that that you worked on, even though they had some bug leaks and stuff like that, or some leaks. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it grew up with kind of an awkward set of rules, and I sort of accepted them because there's so many limitations around what you can reasonably do. Like I said before, needing to read the heap of other. I mean, because you can't do stuff like that. There's no point. There's no point in striving for any kind of perfection, because you just can't attain it. But now you can get a lot closer. I mean, you still have to serialize standard objects, because there's no conceivably safe way around.
That's what I was thinking. So you still handle vanilla other objects, external foreign objects, the same way that you serialize those and then pass them along like that.
Yeah, but threaded objects, which is what you should construct multi-threaded parts of your code from anyway, they aren't serialized.
And the actual members of that, say, like, you pass in.
Then, well, if they're threaded or scalar, they're not serialized. But if they're an object that's not threaded, then it's serialized.
It's serialized. That's really cool, man. And I suppose the thing is, so this is now, because it's RC2, I'm right in thinking, PHP 7 now. I'm just thinking, what is your kind of roadmap with it? Are you hoping for it be released fully? Well, I suppose it has been tagged as version 3 now. Are you just kind of waiting on people to kind of use it and report bugs? And
I'm actually a couple of minor versions along now, just because people don't actually test stuff until you release it. So even though I blogged about it and I kept talking about it on Twitter, no one actually bothered to test it until I actually released it.
So you got a version to it, no one cares. Yeah.
And maybe they were waiting for, I don't know what they were waiting for, but they did. And so I fixed a few, minor bugs, already tagged a couple of versions. And
that's awesome. And with the actual API then, so because you're speaking a lot about like synchronization, and am I right in thinking synchronization is saying that I now have access the lock onto being able to execute this bit of code and no one else is, or?
Yeah, no, that's basically what it is. It's a high level mutual exclusion, basically, in its most simple form. So a synchronized, synchronized is a method on threaded objects, which includes threads and workers. And, you pass it a closure and any arguments you want to pass to the closure, and it acquires a lock and executes the code and then releases the lock. But it releases the lock no matter what, which is extremely important as explained. So that's basically what it does. But also, there's a pattern, might be familiar with it from Java, wait and notify.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically, the way that wait and notify works is, you're supposed to acquire a mutex before you wait. You're supposed to check a precondition that determines whether or not you wait, lock the mutex, check the condition, then wait. And then, when you wait, the mutex that you locked is atomically unlocked and locked, which means that it's unlocked for a single thread. Okay, another thread.
Yep.
So that another thread can acquire the mutex, set the condition, and execute notify. So that wakes the other thread up. So there's only two threads awake at the same time, so that wakes the other thread up, and everything continues. And it checks the precondition and knows that it's been woken up for a reason and continues. So that's basically what synchronization is. It's a way of
abstracting away that stuff,
synchronizing the execution of two contexts. So that's what I'm talking about when I say synchronization. And more generally, I just mean locking mutex and unlocking it.
But then without actually explicitly doing that, instead, providing these, you say, using these kind of, levels above.
Yeah, there needs to be a high level way that's reliable. So that's what we've got now. So in pthreads v2, there's a synchronized method, but stupidly, it only locks the state of the object, not its properties.
Right. So what did that mean then?
Okay, so that means that when you enter a synchronized block in pthreads v2, another object can change properties. Another context can change the properties of the object, which shouldn't be allowed. I mean, that's just stupid. So
was there like a technical kind of limitation?
No, the limitation was, I suppose, my own skill. The pthreads v2 used many locks and many condition variables to do its job, because it seemed appropriate at the time. I've never written an implementation of multi-threading for a language before, so I was new at it. And
it's a hard problem to solve.
It was a hard problem to solve, and I went at it in a hard way. And I'm quite confident with this kind of stuff. Anyway, obviously I've been doing it before I set about this task, but it worked and everything, and it was reliable, but extremely complicated. And for a few reasons, you couldn't have both locks at the same time because it might deadlock. So this is extremely poor and unreliable. Well, not unreliable, but unpredictable is a better word, which is not good. That it will come across as unreliable, but what it is unpredictable. So I changed that. So that in pthreads v3, it's all one lock. So this is much more predictable, and it's easier to explain, and it's what I literally mean predictable when I say predictable, in that when you look at some code, you know how it's going to work by looking at it, and you don't have to worry about race conditions or anything, because everything, if you write it properly, then what you expect is kind of expressed in the code, and it's no more complicated than the code is. So that's the thing to strive for. You want it to be as simple as possible. So that's basically it. So synchronization was improved in V3, which is nice for complex applications.
I can imagine, yeah, absolutely. And with kind of like the switch, so I'm guessing that when do you kind of expect everyone to kind of move out? Because are you actively going to be working on the PHP 5 version when PHP 7's been released? Like when so will you be actively keeping version 2 and version 3 in release?
Well, I mean, for obvious reasons, there's no way to try and backport everything I've done. I've made a couple of commits to the V5 branch, but to be honest, no. I mean, I've got to focus on something, and it's got to be the most productive thing moving forwards. And PHP 5 has got 11 months left to live, in my view, and that means I have to move on now. So that's what I'm doing.
No, I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, did you get a lot of help at all from other people, like other internal people or anyone who's interested in the project?
Not a huge amount. I mean, recently I have actually got some help from some other internals contributors, but in the way of help debugging and things like that. But no, I mean, they're not super interested in it. The set of users that use pthreads is not everyone. I mean, it's a set of power users, really.
That's it. It's very like a niche kind, but it's very useful what it does within that niche.
Yeah, but you've got to be super confident to try, and that's getting rarer and rarer now. So I like it like that though, because if everyone started using it tomorrow, my life would be really busy.
Well, this is it exactly. You would have no time for anything else.
Yeah.
And I mean, and with that, sorry, it's like what is the kind of like the upgrade path then? You know, like I suppose if you've been using lock and unlock and things like that, you need to get rid of that. Obviously, you need to
go back to the code to not use it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Use synchronize. I mean, another thing to say is that whenever you read or write a member, safety is provided for you. You don't need to lock or unlock. It's done for you at the right time. So there's no actual need for it. People were using it because they thought that you couldn't read and write a member at the same time in two contexts, but that's wrong. You can, because it doesn't happen at the same time ever. So that's the other. Just remove it. You don't need it.
Would you say that's kind of like the worst, not the worst thing you've seen, but like kind of the common pattern, like of misconceptions of bad like programming, the multi-threaded programming within pthreads?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. Another one is assuming that globals and things are okay, and obviously, I mean, they're not, are they? What pthreads does for static variables, which are basically globals with the fancy name, but they're globals really. What it does for them is it only copies simple ones. So this means that you can use static scope for like a thread local, which is quite useful. Because it means that, say, if you want to connect to a database, you don't want to try and pass around a database connection object to many threads. It won't work for the first thing. And for the second thing, even if it would work, you won't want to do it because the driver hasn't been designed to be used in that way. So what you want to have is a connection per thread, which is what it's designed to have right now. So you can store that in a static class variable, and it becomes thread local, which is quite useful. I can't remember what the question was.
Oh no, I was just saying, like, if there are any like bad patterns that you've noticed from people that kind of like
basically globals and trying to use statics in silly ways, and
then people get bit by it and then contact you, and then you just have to kind of
and also just assuming that using it in web servers, that happens all the time. I say every opportunity I get, don't use it in web servers. It doesn't make sense. It won't work. Don't try it. And then people report issues with HTML line breaks.
And you're just like, I think you may be using this in the wrong place. This is
Yeah,
not
but I don't say anything, because if you're not going to listen to me, you're not going to listen to me, and I'm not going to say don't use it like that because it's a bit dictatorial. But they are using it wrong. I mean, I can say it to you and in a podcast, they are using it wrong. That is wrong. Don't do that. But yeah, that's probably the worst thing I see, people using it in
and for the audio, but why is it so bad to use?
Okay, well, let's say you think your template needs multi-threading or whatever. Or let's say you want to make, quite a common one is, you want to make multiple requests to other appies.
That's it. You want to kind of like aggregate a load of news feeds or something from loads of different HTTP, like IO kind of lag it,
Yeah, you want to try and make your requests faster. So you think, oh, well, I'll use multi-threading, and yeah, that'll work. That'll work, but it's terrible, because if, say, you have your controller create just like 8 threads, let's say 8 threads, which is quite reasonable. Everyone can, even a phone can execute 8 threads. So let's say you use 8 threads. That's fine when one person comes along, but if 100 people come along at once, you're asking your hardware to execute 800 kernel threads at once. That's just not doable. It's not smart to do that. That will never work. And that's just with 100. That's just a tiny amount of traffic. The busiest websites, not even the busiest websites, just a moderately busy website might handle 10,000 times more than that, 100,000 users at once. That's common. So, this is a terrible way to try and use it. It won't ever work.
So where do you see the use case, and where do you use it? Do you use it in your day-to-day job?
I use it a little bit, but the main use case is when people ask me for a use case for multi-threading, it's like, well, that's a bit weird.
Yeah, it's like you need the problem, and then you realise that you need this.
It's not like a thing that's basically there's the front end of the web, which is like PHP and HTML and JavaScript and all that stuff. That just doesn't need multi-threading. It just doesn't work. It won't work. But all the stuff at the back end of the web, which is database servers, some web servers,
heavy processing, data processing, things like that.
All of this stuff is multi-threaded because that takes advantage of the hardware properly, and it's an easier model to have on the back end of something where it just makes sense there. So that's where people use it in other languages. All your database, MySQL, PostgreSQL, they wouldn't work without threads. They're all multi-threaded. So that's where you use it. At the back end of your application, where you're dealing with data and dealing with appies and things like that, that's where you use multi-threading in any language, actually, not just PHP or whatever. In any language, that's where you should use it. Unless, now, some languages, they've got what they call multi-threading, and it is multi-threading, but it's what's called green threads.
All right.
So that a green thread's not really a thread. It's a bit like a generator in PHP. It's kind of a context that you can switch in and out of, which is like a thread, but in threading it happens in parallel. But in green threads, it might not happen in parallel. It might happen in the same thread at different times. So when these models where you've got many green threads to one kernel thread, this can scale quite well, but obviously it has limitations. The only thing it's super useful for is when the application just lends itself to that pattern, or otherwise asynchronous I/O. But they're the only really obvious use cases for me for that. But pthreads is not that. It's one-to-one. So when you create a thread, that's a kernel thread. That's a proper thread. It will happen in parallel. So.
And like with because I suppose because you spoke a bit about Java and stuff and I suppose did you kind of get a lot of the API kind of choices from the Java implementation?
Yeah, I did. People can hate me for that, but
well, it works. This is the thing, isn't it?
It's really mature. All the stuff you write nowadays, Android applications and whatnot, wouldn't work without it. It's a really well proven model.
And I suppose because the synchronized model and that is all the same and because there's I know that
it is now more or less consistent with Java. Except for the syntax of it, obviously.
Yeah. and with because I know that Java has like a concurrent package that then has like a lot of higher level concurrency models, like objects and things like that. I was wondering, are you hoping to like port those over eventually, or are you going to stick with what it is?
To be honest, no. I mean, everything is an array in PHP. That's just the way people have grown up. There are packages out there. There's one called Arden, written by a friend of mine, with all kinds of data structures in it. It's really cool, but still people actually adopt the notion that different things require different structures, which they absolutely do, by the way. Then there's no point in trying to support that. So instead, threaded objects can be used like arrays. They can be used like thread-safe arrays. So that's as far as I need to go until people have changed their minds about structures.
No, that's cool. That's cool. And I mean, releasing this, so it's all been released on GitHub, I assume, tagged and everything like that, and people are bringing it down. Is it on PECL? Yeah,
so it is. It is, but you have to package it with an old version of PHP. But
I was thinking because at the moment PHP 7 support and PECL and parents is non-existent.
Yeah, because there's no pair support for 7. It's not going to. I don't think PECL's going to come with us. But there's another idea to have something called Pickle, which is basically
the same name.
Yeah, if you look at the PECL website, the logo's a pickle, but I mean, just ignore that. It's going to be called Pickle, and it's going to be a new thing, and
that's quite kind of composer-fied version.
Yeah. I've heard of talk of integration with Composer, which is going to be nice, but I don't know how practical it is. There seems to be a limitation on it that I don't think you want modules installed in your document root. You don't want each website to have its own folder with its own modules in it. It just don't seem sensible to me. Too difficult to keep track of it, too difficult to administer. But that's how it's going to have to work, because obviously you can't have Composer running as root, so you can't install extensions in the...
Yeah, because it's fine for versions of, like, higher level code, PHP code, but actually having modules as well that need to be...
Or maybe the trends will change so that people don't install it in root anymore, they install it in opt or whatever, and they choose a version and whatever, but I don't know how practical that is for our main audience. I mean, the main audience is shared hosting, as much as
we hate, this is it, exactly. As much as everyone thinks
hate that,
yeah,
that's a matter of fact. So it's got to work on shared hosting best. So.
Because I suppose a lot of people are now, who are probably listening to this and, kind of are in, they've moved on in quotes. A lot of it, as you say, still shared hosting is pretty much, where it still wins out. So
yeah, I mean, it was unfair to say professionals, actually. I remember being professional and using shared hosting. That was unfair. But what I mean is, a lot of us don't. I mean, do you deal with hosting? I don't deal with hosting. That's none of my business. Do you know what I mean? I know how it works in that, but we don't use like HostGator or whatever. We don't use any of them. We've got like a data center.
That's it, yeah. Exactly. Once you get to a scale, you then have to handle, the hardware, the software yourself. You have to handle the operating system, etc.
These things are quite a few years in the past for us, is what I mean. And at a certain point, I suppose everyone gets there. So.
That's it. And the thing is now, with like these virtual servers and stuff, VPS, not VPS, sorry, but virtual servers actually like that, the barrier to entry is so low now.
Yeah,
being able to spin up a virtual instance, you can just quickly do it in a matter of seconds and tear it down. And
I think I've got a VPS that cost me $6 a month.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. And yeah, I remember the days of, having these shared hosting and you're just hoping that the version, it's we haven't got this version, no, and just checking to see what you've got waiting for it. And they're so slow on the uptake because, I suppose the thing is they've got to keep it for the lowest common denominator as well. So, that is the problem. And that's why things like WordPress went out and everything, and they have to stay, in quote, they have to stay, around, with like the old code styles, etc., because it works on these shared hosting platforms.
Yeah.
Which is always a bit of a pain. Because, I mean, that's one thing, obviously, with PHP 7, MySQL, the extent, is now being deprecated. It's not only just deprecated, it's been removed. Yeah. And I know you said that, that it's moving quite quickly, that PHP 5 is going to be end of life, is it right, in about 11 months then?
Well, it's end of life, but it still receives security fixes, so I don't know if they call it end of life, but it's basically done with in 11 months, so you haven't got long. It's not sensible to use it after it's actively being developed, really.
And was this like a conscious effort from the team then to say, look, we need to keep pushing on?
We've got a release schedule now, and we're just trying to stick to it.
Yeah, you got finite amount of resources.
extremely finite.
Yeah, finite amount of resources, and you can't, be spending your time on legacy, code that's only, maybe only going to affect, certain people are just going to have to bite the bullet.
You read on Reddit about Zend, and you imagine, this is probably a room full of people that work every hour of every day on it, but this is not the case. Actually, from Zend, there's only one person that works on PHP full time, so we don't have a lot of manpower to get stuff done. So you've got to keep the pace up because that's how you keep moving forwards. So it's worked for all of the 5 releases. They kept getting better and better, and it kept getting better and better, and hopefully that's gonna
carry on from 6 to 7.
Yeah. So
I remember you saying yesterday actually that there were there's already talk about 7.1 release, kind of like things like this nice.
Actually, a few minutes ago, 7 was branched.
Ooh.
There's now a 7 branch. It's so it's been branched. So yeah, we're moving on. There's no stopping it.
And I suppose at the moment with RC2, it is just kind of, it's all stabilised and just trying to weed out any of the bugs and stuff.
Yeah, it's basically, we just call in for testers, really. Just get you testing your code on it and try and run your test suites on it and things like that.
And I'd also say then, I suppose, like with pthreads and some of your other extensions, is to definitely kind of the same thing. Test it out, send you pull requests or kind of bug fix.
Yeah, send me bug reports, but make sure that they're sensible.
Yeah.
And they've got enough information in them to actually determine what the bug is. Quite often people will post a bug report just saying, I've got this problem. And my favourite one is, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Thank you. That's so informative. I know exactly what you mean by it doesn't work.
I tried to do this, but it doesn't work. And that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
That really doesn't mean anything. That's like, my 6-year-old says stuff doesn't work because he can't express himself.
That's it, yeah, exactly. It's like, it doesn't work. It's like,
so without being mean to anyone in particular, that's what I read when I read it doesn't work. I read my 6-year-old going, it doesn't work.
Oh, brilliant. And other extensions like uopz and your APCu, how are they going? What's like things going on with them?
I should have tagged the release of APCu already, but I'm very busy and I just haven't got around to doing that yet. But APCu is basically ready. uopz is about 3/4, 2/3, 3/4 ready. Just a few more tests to get passing, and then that's basically I've got another couple of extensions, but that's basically.
And I suppose all the work that you did with pthreads, kind of looking into, in depth into like the internals of it now, you can kind of take that to uopz and APCu and all these other extensions and really get used to it.
It probably doesn't seem like it, but uopz and pthreads do actually share some code. So yeah, that basically taught me everything I need to know to fix the rest of uopz. APCu would share the same code. It's the code that copies operands, so the internal representation of like a function or script. That's shared between. Well, it's mostly shared between uopz and pthreads.
That's interesting because with APCu, because APCu is just the user land,
it's just the user land stuff. But it used to be the code cache as well, and it used to have the same kind of code in it. But it doesn't anymore, so it's much simpler now.
And have you been working on like any other? Because I think again it was like Xdebug was one that you said you were helping out with.
The problem is, it's not just my extensions that we rely on at work. We rely on other people's extensions as well. So now that mine are looking all right, I've been putting some effort into other people's. Just a day here and there. I helped Derek for a few hours one day, and I worked on memcached for a couple of days. And I'll continue to work on memcached and Xdebug actually, because we need them. So now's the time to sort of get involved with other people's extensions, I figure.
How are you finding them? Are they struggling? Like, have you been able to help them?
Well, a little bit. Xdebug is extremely complicated.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, because of necessity. It does a complicated job, and not to make it worse, he's probably done the right thing in that he's actually maintaining the PHP 7 version and the PHP 5 version in the same branch.
Wow. That does sound like a lot of if-defs.
Yeah, it is a lot. But it's probably the right thing to do, though. Other people have chosen the easy route and chosen to branch, but that's probably going to make things difficult down the line.
So has he said that he's going to be supporting, I'm assuming, the PHP 5 branch?
Yeah, he's no option. Everyone in the world uses Xdebug, so everyone that uses PHP should use Xdebug. So yeah, he's got no choice. He'll have to maintain it.
That is the trouble with becoming like kind of a de facto in the extension world, is that then you do have to kind of bite the bullet. You can't bite the bullet as much as you wish you could.
He does a full-time job, and he's got a lot to do for Xdebug, but he's getting through it though. But if other people know how to join in, they should, obviously.
That's also. I mean, I suppose the thing is then is like, how will we be getting these? So with that, I mean, we just have to hope like Pickle and things like that, because at the moment it will just be compiling them from source.
Yeah, you'll have to check them out from Git, and you have to clone them from Git and compile them from source for the moment. But I think how to do that's getting.
Oh, I mean, like a shameless plug here from us is we actually showed on our first screencast we did together with how to do that, compiling PHP from source, and then I mean the similar thing to how we were doing with PHPizing.
And I'm sure you could just like search Stack Overflow or just search Google for how to install PHP extensions. It's pretty well known. It's always been the same, so it should be quite easy for people to do that. The problem is that people don't really like extensions. I mean, they have to use Xdebug, and most operating systems have it in their package repository. But people don't like extensions. When you bring out an extension, the first thing people say is, "Oh, it's an extension. I don't want to use that if there's an extension." It's like, well, everything you use is an extension.
It's an extension, exactly. PHP relies on the fact that everything's an extension almost.
But it is a problem, and it's a special problem. It's a special problem for pthreads, because it not only is it an extension, but it requires a specific kind of build of PHP, which is a real pain in the arse. And interestingly, the other day, someone who works on something called PHP-SA, which is a static analyzer for PHP, they opened a bug report saying that they were trying to do a branch using pthreads, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll have a look at that. And I had a look at it for a while, and I had to play with it, and then we were chatting on the GitHub issue, and he said, what do you think about a compatibility layer? And it had never occurred to me before, but if there's a polyfill, people that want to write code that, if it's available, can take advantage of pthreads, but if it's not available, it still needs to work. People that want to write code that can do that didn't really have any option. So what I've done is I made a package, it's on Packages and on GitHub, and it polyfills pthreads, so that you can write code that assumes that pthreads is available, and if it's not available, it will still work. But if
That's great. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but I never had it before. It was totally this guy's idea on the issue. I mean, community works. It really does work. It's always worth listening to people.
That's right. I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, because that's a great idea. That it allows you then, at least then, you're not specking it. I mean, you really do want to kind of, use it if you can, but if you can't, it's not going to be just blow up in your face.
Yeah, for whatever. I mean, that's one of the main barriers to entry, is that people know that you can't really rely on it being available on other machines, because a lot of people aren't willing to rebuild PHP, or they don't know how to install a thread-safe one. So
you want like that gradual improvement, where if you do have it, oh great, it's going to go quicker. But if you don't have it, it's not going to blow up. It's going to be fine.
This is another thing, because actually, no, that's not always true. I mean, if you this is quite a good tool for this as well, because if you run without pthreads and then run with pthreads, and you can see that it doesn't go any faster, then you can say there's no point in following this. I'm going down the wrong path. It's not going to make it any better, because the objects are all the same, the tasks are the same. The only difference is it's not executed in parallel. So if executing it in parallel does not make it faster, then you can actually see it doesn't make it faster.
You haven't got the problem that this solves.
You might think, oh well, it's quite awkward to write it as if it's multi-threaded just on the off chance, but really it's not. Because the kind of work you do is the kind of work that would only lend itself to already being written in such a way that you've got individual tasks, and you write it, you encapsulate it like that, so that each individual task is an individual task, and it doesn't need to know about other tasks. And if you've got that kind of job, then already that tells you this might be good as multi-threaded code, because these tasks don't need to communicate with each other. They just need to go as fast as they can. And that's what you want in multi-threaded code. You don't want tasks that are all intermixed and communicating with each other. You want individual sections of code. So if you're writing code and it lends itself to that already, you might as well try threading it. So,
I mean, sure, that's what you see is that people just they assume, oh, it's all right, it's slow, we'll just pthreads, we'll use that, and we'll just, and then it doesn't.
It doesn't work like that, no. It never will work like that. I mean,
you have to architectural design that caters towards it.
Yeah, you can't just throw threads at anything and expect it will go. If you throw 16 threads at it, people think it'll go 16 times faster, but that's not the case at all. So you should always try and deduce that for yourself before trying anything really. You should always think about what you're actually doing. Can I do this another way? Is there another way to do it without making it complicated? But if you're writing something and it looks like these are individual tasks and they share some resources, but they're individual, they don't talk to it, they don't need to know about each other, they don't change the state of each other, they don't share a bunch of state with other things, and that's already a description of something that's good candidate for threading. So then you can try it with the polyfill and see if you can write it in a way that will
lend itself towards that.
Yeah, and then if pthreads is available, it will use it.
That's great, man. Well, again, thank you so much, Joe, for coming on the podcast and kind of your words of wisdom kind of spread, our audience, I'm sure, really appreciate it. And also, speaking, I think I just mentioned it, but, the shameless plug is, me and Joe did release a couple of videos that I think have gone down quite well. And I've really enjoyed watching them and rewatching them and also recording them with you. We're talking about PHP, extension development. So, with the first one, we went through like an introductory one where we kind of spoke about how to set up an environment, like a Linux Mint installation. We had some fun setting that up, which was an interesting one. But, eventually once that was done, we kind of did a good one, kind of introductory screencast there. And I think we actually made like a small array map function, or array sum function that dealt with those long integers. Well, not long, long value types. And then we also then did a second screencast, which was moved into a lot more depth, like into talking about objects. And I really enjoyed doing that one. And I'll definitely be up for doing some more.
Yeah, I will be. Yeah, it's good. It's good. I enjoy them a lot. It's quite a difficult skill.
You make sure you appreciate people who do that. The screencast. Because even I found editing them so much harder. Being able to keep it in sync with video and audio, it's a completely different ballgame to what we're doing now, where it's just like an audio recording, click record. Maybe you do a couple of tweaks in Audacity afterwards, but there's no kind of work that you need to do compared to a screencast.
When you say that to people, it's much different, it's much harder. They kind of look at you a bit weird, but it's kind of like when police officers are training to, if they're going to be drivers for the police, they do their driving test, obviously they haven't got a license, and then they do another driving test where, while they're driving along, they've got to verbosely explain everything they see and what it might mean. And they've got to talk about their surroundings, and they've got to observe certain things, and they've got to be able to remember. It's
like doing it on overdrive, and that must be that's a really good analogy.
It's like doing a mundane thing like driving or coding for us, and then talking about it at the same time is actually quite a challenge for your brain. If you're not used to it, it's quite difficult. So we're getting that right, I think, now. Even though we got a bit of stick on Reddit for the last one.
Well, I noticed, and then they were all deleted, these accounts, so,
Yeah, they were downloaded, deleted, But we don't listen to that.
Don't listen to the haters, but no,
I mean... If you're going to be constructive, you've got something to say, then say it. Even if it don't sound very nice, say it.
Well, that's it, exactly. You can look through a lens and say, look, okay, this maybe sound horrible, but they do have a point. But if they don't have a point, you can take it on board, think, all right, I'm taking it on board, it's not going to help me, I'm ignoring it. Yeah. So, everyone's got a voice and everyone is entitled to, say what they want. But, but I'm also entitled to, say yes or no, whether it's right or wrong for us.
Yeah, we'll ignore it, yeah. So, that's what we do. I can't wait to do another one, they're good fun. I've started a couple of examples, but I haven't got a...
I can imagine after pthreads and all this, you must have been crazy working hard.
Yeah, and, I have found time to start, but I just haven't really, and I've spent quite a while on them, but they're not right, and I haven't really got a clear idea in my head of what the next example is going to be. I know what I want to show, but I'm not used to writing code for the benefit of talking about it and stuff. it's quite a challenge.
It's a very different game, but no, I really appreciate it, and I know the audience, the amount of views we've had, it shows that people are really interested in it, and it's really nice that, you and internals guys, taking the time to do this, because, it really helps out other people who are trying to get into it, or at least try and understand it, and appreciate how hard it is.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good, it's one of my favourite pastimes, actually. I mean, even when I'm not, on working clock, on working hours, I'm basically doing the same stuff. It's become my hobby.
That's it. All right then, Joe. Well, thank you so much again, man, for coming on the show. And I think it was just about getting up to the hour mark, so that'd be a good time to end the podcast. But yeah, it'd be great to have you on again. And we'll have to book up a couple more podcasts and screencasts in the near future.
Cool.
All right then, man. Well, audience, it's been great speaking to you, and we'll speak to you next week. All right then. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.